Occasionally you'll see people throw around terms like useless use of cat as if it has some inherent meaning, and they don't even bother to explain it. So today, that's what we're going to be doing. So we're going to explain what it means, why it's a problem, and maybe even more importantly than those two, how to actually avoid it. So if you're new to the channel, you know what to do, and let's jump right into it. So let's start from an absolute fundamental level. What is cat? So cat, if you don't know, somehow if you're using a Linux system and you have no idea what cat is, basically what it is, it's a little program for concatenating files, but a lot of people will also use it to print files to stand it out. Now, the reason why this is a problem is because you don't actually need to do this. So what a lot of people will do, if they want to preview a file, they'll do something like this. So test.txt, and that'll actually let you see the file. But as I was saying before, you don't actually have to do this. And the reason why some people describe this as a problem is because you don't need to waste an extra process to do this. You can do all of this without opening up an external program. So it might be a little bit faster, but cat is such a quick program anyway that the speed improvement is basically negligible. It's just that also doing it through the better method is a few less characters to write, so there's also that improvement as well. But there's also a couple of other places where a useless use of cat will crop up as well, so we'll get to those in just a moment. So how do we avoid doing this? Now for this, it's actually very simple. So if you're very new to the shell and you don't know about the concept of redirections yet, let's just go over that. So if we do test.txt, so that's my first file, and then we do a less than arrow and we go test2.txt, what this is going to do is redirect all of the output from this file into the first file. So what does a redirection mean? So that basically means just take everything that's in it and send it somewhere else. So in this case, we're going to send all of the text in test2 to test.txt. So what if we, instead of doing this, we remove this first file? So we're going to redirect to nothing. Now, if you redirect to nothing, what this is going to do is redirect to standard out. So standard out is just the default place to output text to. So in this case, it's going to be my terminal. Now, if we do that, as we can see, that has eliminated the use of cat and we can still actually see the file. Now, this doesn't work on every single terminal. Like, for example, if we go to bash and we try to do the same thing, we go test.txt, at least with my settings, it doesn't actually work. So I think there's a way to enable it. I'm not really sure how, but on ZSH at least, when you do a redirection to standard out, it'll work perfectly fine. So that's just one thing to note. That method isn't always going to work. For that, it might be fine to just do test.txt if you don't feel like changing your shell settings. So I didn't actually show what cat is supposed to be used for. So I said it can be used to concatenate files, but what does that actually mean? So if we do this, so test2 in here, so what we're going to be doing is concatenating test.txt and test2.txt. Now, the reason this is still fine to do is because the other method doing concatenation, which is like this, so test.txt and then append test2.txt, this method will actually modify the file, whereas the method with cat will just concatenate them to standard out. So that's why it's still fine to use cat to do this. So what if we want to do a bit more than just outputting a file and we actually want to do some processing on it? So I've got a little script that I wrote a bit off camera, so let's have a look at this one. So it's called cat-redirect. Okay, so we've got this first example in here, so let's just run this. So cat-redirect. Now what this one is doing is just stripping out all of the O characters from this file. Now, as we can see in here, I'm using a cat to do this. So how would we actually change this? So if we have a look at those redirections we just did before, we don't just have to redirect to standard out. We can actually redirect to a command. So if instead of doing it like this, we change this to a redirection, so test.txt. Now, instead of using the cat, we're just using a redirect. So if we run this again, as we can see, it has the exact same output. So that's how you'd go about eliminating it in that case. So what about this second example here? So as we notice, it's already using a redirection. So let's just run this and see what it actually does. So cat redirect. Actually, why am I doing it like that? I should have just pressed up. Anyway, what this is going to do is select the third field from every single line. So what's actually wrong with this? So if we look at the man page for cat, we'll see that it actually takes in a file argument. So in this case, you shouldn't be using a redirection and you shouldn't be using a cat. What you should be using instead is just passing in the file path. So if we just run it like this instead, that's the man page again. If we run it like this, As we can see, it produces the exact same output. And the same is true for grep. So if we run this grep right here, so what this is going to do is select every single line that contains line. So I run that, and as we can see, we get these 2 lines. But if we look at the man page for grep as well, as we will see, it actually takes a file argument as well. So what we can do here instead is just pass in test.txt. And if we run it like this, it produces the exact same output. So there's a lot of programs that you may be cutting into, or you may be redirecting into even, that actually take in file arguments. And for programs like that, you should really just be using the file argument within the actual program, because that's what it's there for. So this next one is more of just a toy example, but just follow along with me for a second. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating a subshell. So if you don't know, if you put brackets around a section of commands, that'll create a subshell. Now a subshell, for all intents and purposes, will basically act as if that block is just a single program. So you can do things like redirect into it, or you could even pipe into it. So what I'm doing here is I'm redirecting this test.txt into this block. So the way that this would look if you were doing a cat instead would be something like this. So cat test.txt, and then pipe that in. So if I run this, if we see, this will basically create the same output as doing it like this. So the preferred way to write this, obviously if this first command in here didn't actually take a file argument, but just follow along with me, the preferred way to write this would actually be to use this redirection. And this last command I have in here isn't really about removing cats, but it is something cool you can do with redirections. So what I'm doing here is I'm using some subshells and redirections. So what you can do with a subshell is basically treat this as a single block, and this allows you to do something that's really cool. So if you want to apply some processing before you pass something into another program, you can then process it in a subshell and then redirect that subshell to wherever it needs to go. So in this case, I'm diffing these 2 files where I'm only grepping out the line that has the word the in it. So if I run it like this, as we will see, so this will basically show that the first 2 lines are a little bit different. Now, obviously, this isn't a really useful example, but there might be cases where this actually makes sense to do. So now we're going to move away from basic commands to a loop example. So let's just have a look at that one. So if you've been following along this entire video, you should probably be able to notice exactly what's wrong here. So what I'm doing is I'm catting out this test.txt file, and then I'm piping it into the while loop. So if we run this, basically all this is going to do is echo out each individual line. So nothing too special there. Obviously you can apply some processing to this. So if you wanted to do something like, I don't know, tr-d and then remove any of the O's, you could do that. So we'll run that again like this, and that's a little bit more interesting. So how would we remove this cat here? So it's not exactly obvious from what I showed earlier, but it will make sense when you see it. So what we can do instead is, instead of putting the cat up there, what we can do is actually redirect down here. So test.txt. So what we're doing now is we're actually redirecting this file into the while loop. So we run this again, and as we will see, that produces the exact same output. So a redirection will actually work on a while loop. So this will also work on other loop structures as well. I don't know about the specific bash versions and things like that, but I know for basic loop structures like this, it will work. So I think this should give you a pretty good idea of where you're using cats that shouldn't be used and how you can actually fix them. Now, before someone points it out, I am well aware that a lot of my scripts have cats that shouldn't be there. I wrote a lot of those scripts quite a while ago, and I just haven't gotten around to fixing them. Now, one last thing I did want to mention is that some people make a bigger deal out of this than they really should be. In the end, it doesn't actually matter, because cat is such a quick program anyway. The amount of processing time it takes to actually use cat as opposed to a redirection is almost negligible. So in the end, you don't really have to fix it. I just wanted to show you what this actually means, so that if someone does point it out to you, you actually know how to fix it if you do want to fix it. So I think that's pretty much everything for this video. So if you like this video, then remember to smash that like button and leave me a comment down below letting me know what you think. If you want to see more videos like this, then remember to subscribe and ding the little bell icon down below, because it'll really help the channel out. I'm now aiming for 10,000 subs, and any help would be really appreciated. Up on that corner, I've got the playlist of videos in, so go check that out if you want to see other videos like this. Down below, I've got my social links, that'll be my Discord, my Telegram, and all of that sort of stuff. So go check that out if you want to chat with me or get video updates. I've also got my support links down below, so that'll be my Patreon and various other donate links. So if you do want to support the channel, then that'd be awesome, but as always, You don't have to if you don't want to, but any help will be really appreciated. And lastly, I've got my alternate video platforms. So that'll be my BitTube and my library. So go check those out if you want to see my videos on platform that isn't YouTube. So I think that's pretty much everything for this video. I feel like this recording went way better than my last couple did. So I don't know. I don't know what's happened. Maybe I got a bit more sleep today. I don't feel like I did, but something happened. Anyway, I think that's pretty much everything for me, and I'm out.